coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over, over there, over there, over there. Send the word over.
Hey everybody, this is Joshua Littereell. Thank you so much for tuning in today on the Veterans for Cannabis podcast. Holy cow, could I be more excited? Probably not. Because guess what? Election 2020 is behind us. But even more so on top of that, guess what happened? I bet you all can't guess it here on the Veterans for Cannabis podcast, can you? Take a moment, think about it. What happened that could be a positive for us all? Well, I'll tell you what, cannabis sure as hell won this year. And what does that mean? That means that from a state standpoint, there were so many states that delivered an absolutely unanimous mandate for recreational marijuana use. And I hate that M word. You all know that. So we're going to say cannabis from now on. And please encourage your friends and loved ones and listeners to utilize the cannabis word instead of the M word, right? But voters in the state of Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota, and Mississippi all approved cannabis. Now, what does that mean? That means that they approved it in a couple different ways, and we'll go into that during this podcast. But let's count that one more time. Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota, and Mississippi, a state below the Mason-Dixon line, a very conservative state that nobody thought would get anything done, damn sure got it done. So that unanimous mandate for recreational cannabis use was, I think, everybody kind of expected it. But I talked to a lot of our brothers and sisters in the veteran community, and I talked to a lot of people in the cannabis industry, and we're going to bring those guests on in early 21 as well. But I think everybody had high hopes of it happening. Nobody really thought it was going to happen, to be honest with you, because they knew that Republicans were going to come out heavy and Democrats are going to come out heavy, and nobody really knew where the election was going to go first and foremost. And we haven't even got to the federal level yet. This is just states that we're talking about. But I think the thing that most of our colleagues in the cannabis industry underestimated was the fact that it doesn't matter if you're red or blue. It doesn't matter if you're a damn Democrat, if you're a damn Republican. It does not matter. We all support cannabis, right? And I say that we because I'm that, you're that, we're all that. Thank you all so much for tuning in today here on the Veterans for Cannabis podcast because I'm so excited. Golly, when I talk about this election, I never thought that we would see what's happened with the Biden administration, the president-elect. I didn't think that was coming. I thought it was going to be a really, really, really strong race, but I don't think anybody really saw what's happened and the pushback that's been during this last month or so, waiting on the president to get out of office or at least acknowledge that he's no longer in office as we're waiting on President-elect Biden to put some stuff together. But the key that I think I personally believed in, and I think a lot of you all may have thought, is that we're going to do a good job at the state level. And it's absolutely evident now with the unanimous mandate that came out of Arizona, Montana, Jersey, and South Dakota. But the approval for medicinal cannabis was out of Mississippi, and that's a really, really big win. And that's something that I don't think could be taken lightly. So we're talking about Mississippi. And first and foremost, as you all know, most of you all know, I'm sitting here in Georgia right now, a really conservative state. We're still waiting on the medical cannabis program to get done. So I hope to goodness, I wouldn't wish this on any of my enemies, that Mississippi's medical cannabis program takes as long as Georgia's has. That's for darn sure. But what I will tell you is that the state of Mississippi voting in favor of medical cannabis is a huge, huge, huge win. So with those 5 states that we just went over, there are only 15 states now that still outlaw cannabis in any form. 15 states. So there's something that I talk about a lot of times, and a lot of you all listeners may have heard me use this term in the past, but one of the things I want to point out is we're at a tipping point now. that tipping point means that you're over the majority. You have the majority side of it, right? It's tipped over the top. We've hit that apex, and we've tilted the pendulum to our favor, the cannabis side's favor, for medical cannabis, recreational cannabis, decriminalization, whatever it may be. There are only 15 states left. 15 states left. So out of 50, when you think about that, I mean, President-elect Biden is sitting here with 15 states left that still outlaw cannabis. I think day one, he has to take a strong stance on this and just pen to ink to paper. Let's put an executive order out there, decriminalize cannabis across the board, and call it a day. I think he may do it. I don't know. Who knows? We're sending up some carrier pigeons to hopefully be delivered just outside the White House, where President-elect Biden is waiting to go in. But hopefully he gets the message. You know, we'll see. I think that'll be a really interesting process in the first month, the first 100 days of President-elect Biden's office, to see what happens. But with 15 states left now, we need you all, the voters, to get active. We need you all to have that call to action that we always talk about. Get involved and start emailing, start calling, start writing letters, writing that old letter, right? People no longer write letters, but you can still write a letter on nice letterhead, put a great signature on there and send it to a congressperson. They actually will read that. And the neat thing is that letters used to be the only way to communicate, you know, and now very few people use them anymore. But guess what? If you write a letter to your congressperson, whether it's your United States House representative or your United States senator, they actually more than likely will get that and read it, because very few people send letters anymore. So it's pretty amazing how we've gone full circle in that process, that emails and phone calls are how the information's passed now and how the pendulum gets swung in certain directions. But one of the quickest and easiest ways to make that direct connection to your elected officials is to write a letter. And it doesn't take a whole lot. One sheet, a nice little letterhead, put your name information on it, your address, where you're out of. And even if you include your district, that's even better. You say, hey, sir or ma'am, I am in your district. That's a big, big, big win. So just send some letters. Let's try to get this thing done at the federal level, because with those 15 states, and I don't want to name them, but mainly because they're not in front of me, but I will have that on a different podcast, that 15 states are still left that still don't allow cannabis in some form, shape, or fashion, whether it's medical or recreational. We got to get those states taken care of. We got to get that fixed, you know. I think the biggest part about what's happened with this election cycle in 2020 is the repudiation of harsher elements of America's, you know, war on drugs that's happened over the last 30 or 40 years, since Nancy Reagan was frying our brain on drugs, right? We've seen how it's terribly, terribly affected so many black and brown men, you know, that are still incarcerated for minor offenses. And the crazy part of this, I saw an old white guy that's in his late 60s, early 70s that had a 500-year sentence. 500 years, like 530 years for cannabis possession and distribution. A nonviolent offender that had a 500-year sentence that just got released on a nonviolent offender release program for those who are sick or ailing. He's a higher risk of COVID and all these other things. Anyway, his attorneys were able to make the case for him to get released early so that he could go home to his grandkids now. And I believe he had some great grandkids, but that's crazy. You know, I mean, we still have men and women like that that are in jail today. Today, here in 2020, there are still non-violent drug offenders in jail. That is absolutely asinine. And I think the voters said that. They said that this election cycle in so many other states, in so many different municipalities. You know, there's so many positive things that are coming out from psychedelic research, with psilocybin, with LSD, with MDMA, all these different things that are utilizing as treatment options for PTS and different ailments that may be out there. there were states and municipalities that now, and I think in Oregon, they even outlawed, made legal the personal possession of heroin, of pills. They also made personal possession of, I think, mushrooms, so the psilocybin side of it. All of that was basically decriminalized. That's a huge, big old punch right in the eye to this terrible war on drugs. And I hope to goodness that President-elect Biden sees that big old black ass eye on this war of drugs and he puts them in prison. I wish, if I had it my way, and I think you all, the listeners, would probably agree with this, that all of these people that had been arresting these nonviolent drug offenders for the last years, 30, 40 years now, I think they should spend a week in jail. Just a week, not a whole lot, and I mean a real week in jail, a real week in prison, not these Jeffrey Epstein prisons that they would go to and all this stuff with Felicity Huffman, jails. I want them in a real, Leavenworth. Let's send them there for a good week. Let them know what it's been like for these nonviolent drug offenders to spend time in jail for a plant, for a substance, for most of the time things that were a mental illness, not for killing somebody, not for holding up a grocery store, not for a DUI that killed 2 people. No, for selling a plant. That's absolutely crazy. That's the big old black eye that I would like to see President Biden. If it was President Joshua Litteral, here with the Veterans for Cannabis podcast, being the president, I would absolutely make that a mandate. Spend a week in jail for all of you in the DEA, ATF, all that stuff that, no, maybe not ATF. They do some pretty bad criminals, but DEA specifically. Let's definitely make them spend a week in jail. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox. So it was a great, phenomenal election for cannabis in general. But I think the biggest part of that is how the voters came out against our failed war on drugs. And that's a big, big deal. I'm going to read a study that was from a Pew Research from back in 2019 that found 67% of American adults believe that cannabis should be legal. 32% disagreed. In 1969, that same Pew Research firm that did this research found that only 12% favored legalization, with 84% against it. So we're talking about in what, 50 years, right? 60 years? No, 50 years? I think, yeah. 60 years. So in 60 years, we went from 12% in favor to 67% in favor of cannabis being legal. 67%. I mentioned this number earlier, and I've talked about it on other podcasts, that we don't agree as Americans on 67% of the issue at hand. I mean, very few things can I think about that we agree at 67% tilt, right? That's a huge number. That's a big change just in the last, basically, generation, I want to say. Because, when you think about it, 50, 60 years, that's really only one generation. I mean, it's 2, 3 possibly, yes, but it's really only one when you're talking about a true paradigm shift. And this was an absolute paradigm shift. From 1969, 12% in favor of legalization, 84% against it, to 2019 that found 67% of American adults believed that cannabis should be legal, and only 32% disagreed. That's a big number, and I love to talk about that. And I think you all should reference that too, as you're moving forward through these conversations with people who may not be on our side, if you will, and may not support cannabis access, may not support medical cannabis, may not support recreational for sure. Just talk to them about the numbers and ask them why. That's the biggest part of it. We ask them why. Why not? And don't let them give you the same old BS arguments. Oh, it's because it's your brain on drugs and it's an egg in the front. No, doesn't work.